So today's session is exploring the lessons learned by the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers and the Montreal Community Loan Fund. It's brought to you by the Canadian Community Economic Development Network. We're a national association of several hundred community organizations and individuals working to create local economic opportunities that support an inclusive and sustainable economy. Here you can see a few of our members' logos. If you like the session today, consider joining us by becoming a member or signing up for our free e-newsletters. This webinar is part of our national series. Past sessions include topics such as youth employment, social return on investment, the resilience imperative, social impact bonds, and many others. All of these past sessions are on our website. So there's a picture of me. I'm going to be your host, and the webinar is divided up into two parts. To start off, we're going to have presentations by Dennis and Jacqueline that will last about 30 minutes. Then in the second part, I'll ask them the questions that you will have posed in your chat box, in the chat box there on the screen. Once again, you should feel free to share those at any time. But before we get into the presentation, let's just have a sense of who is on the webinar today with two quick poll questions for our participants. You should be able to go ahead and answer these two poll questions with multiple choice questions. What brought you here today? And what do you see as the biggest barrier to immigrant entrepreneurship? So a bit of background on your interest in the session and what you feel are some of the biggest impediments to immigrants succeeding in their entrepreneurship. And while people answer that question, I'll just do a brief intro for the session. Immigrants to Canada make up nearly 20% of the population, but they face significant disparities in many areas of life. The income gap between newcomers and Canadian-born employees is growing, and more recent immigrants are not faring as well as those in the past. Entrepreneurship can be a strategy to overcome income disparities, but many immigrants have difficulty accessing mainstream business development supports. The Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers and the Montreal Community Loan Association have specialized in entrepreneurship supports for immigrants, and their successful programs have generated some unique insights. So this session will present the lessons from Dennis and Jacqueline on those two effective models and consider the implications for improving immigrant settlement and integration in Canada. Before I introduce Dennis, let's just have a look at our poll results. Here we can see that most of our participants work for organizations that support immigrant entrepreneurship. We have one person with general interest and one other. And a couple of people are typing in the chat box there. And so in terms of the biggest barriers for immigrant entrepreneurship, it's a bit spread out, but startup capital is the top there. Business skills and other are also closely ranked, and language skills, of course, is an essential factor. Jackie commented the other that she develops training programs for a wide variety of participants, including immigrants. Right. Excellent. Thanks, Jackie. Great. Okay. So thanks for participating in that poll. Let me introduce Dennis. Dennis has launched 7 companies, a serial entrepreneur, as you might say, as CEO of one of these, Wildman Enterprises. Dennis created and is the lead facilitator in a training program for immigrants who want to start their own companies. The program, called Entrepreneurship for Immigrants, is offered by the Wildman Institute in partnership with the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers. As of December 14th, last year, it graduated approximately 120 students. More than 50% of those are in business. Dennis also serves on the board of several nonprofit organizations and teaches board development and leadership training. So thanks for joining us, Dennis.
You're very welcome. I found the survey of barriers quite fascinating. I'm actually going to start off as I begin my presentation explaining what we learned about the barriers to immigrant entrepreneurship.
Interesting. So can you tell us a bit, why did Wildman Enterprise and the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers get involved in entrepreneurship training?
Well, as you were saying yourself, the wage gap between immigrants and born-heres is large, and for a while it narrowed, and now it's widening again. And recent immigrants aren't doing as well in that sense as previous immigrants did. Near and dear to my heart because I actually had the occasion of watching a great cardiovascular surgeon waste 10 years of his working as a janitor because of the rules here in Canada. It took him 10 years to get his licensing here in Canada, and within 2 weeks he went back to the Czech Republic to be the head of thoracic and cardiac surgery at the largest hospital in the Czech Republic. So basically he lost 10 years of his life, huge human resource waste. And ever after that, that was in the late 90s, I kept thinking there has to be a better way of helping talented immigrants. And eventually it occurred to me that what I do myself might work for them, that as an entrepreneur myself, I might be able to help them overcome some of the barriers. And I started off thinking that the barriers were very much the same they would be for myself, for a born here entrepreneur. But immigrants, it doesn't work like that. And one of the things that research shows is that entrepreneurship can narrow the wage gap, and the reason it can is because immigrant entrepreneurs actually outperform born here entrepreneurs. They are better at it than we are. Now, some of that's probably cultural. Some of it's because more of them are prepared to start a business. I would think people who immigrate, I don't have any research, but I'd guess that they probably are very good risk managers. They've made very daring decisions, brave decisions. But they've also often, when you talk to them, spent a very long time thinking about those decisions before they made them. And risk management rather than risk-taking. Risk management is the key to successful entrepreneurship and to being prepared to start a business, because any business is inherently risky. And they simply outperform us. And thus it's the one area of employment in Canada where they actually have an advantage. And in some categories, like both importing and exporting, they outperform born here by vast margins. So if you can get people to be in business, you know, it's not trying to encourage people to be in business for the sake of being in business, but if they come from the background, if they have the interest, and you encourage them to do it, they can become very successful here, and then they employ other people, and that has a benefit to your whole economy. But often the first people they employ are family members, so you improve family income, and then often the next round of people they employ are people from within their own ethnic group, so now you're also providing employment, which helps narrow the wage gap. And we need these people desperately because I'm fairly typical in my late 50s, well, mid-50s, I guess I should probably say, somewhere in between. And I'm coming up on that stage where I will retire one of these days, and there are fewer and fewer born here starting businesses. It's very hard to sell a business and realize the equity you've spent your lifetime earning. And for most entrepreneurs, that's their retirement plan, is to sell the business and live on the money that generates. And if there's no one to buy it, then there's no effective retirement plan. And I know a lot of local business people in Edmonton who have brought in immigrants to work with them who are their succession plan. Their children don't want it, or they don't have children, and now the immigrants are basically learning the business and will buy it out over time. In fact, that's what I myself am doing. The young man I hope one day will replace me is from Pakistan. But in any case, they give us an exit strategy that we wouldn't have. So for every entrepreneur in Canada already here, every born here, we want as many immigrant entrepreneurs as we can. And really, honestly, what we've learned is that culture matters a great deal. I botched a major, we were working on a project where we were applying for grant money to build what would be Edmonton's first huge solar power plant. And it ended up in part collapsing because of cultural differences between the born here's working on it and the immigrants here working on it, because we didn't understand each other and we didn't understand the cultural expectations. So I've seen as an entrepreneur the overwhelming problem culture can be, and language is a barrier, but it's not as big a barrier as the ability to clearly communicate your idea can be. In many cultures that immigrants come from who come to Canada, is not common to stand up in front of people and sell yourself. That is, to pitch your idea, to do what we call in the trade an elevator pitch. And so in class, we work on that over and over and over again, trying to get them comfortable explaining their idea and saying why it's important to them, and why they can do it. And honestly, there are probably no bigger barriers than culture and presentation. It's hard for any entrepreneur to raise money, flat out, just nigh on impossible at startup to get money. But the best ideas, if people are patient and persistent, can find money. But you can't find that money if you can't present, if you can't write a good business plan, and if there are cultural barriers that prevent you doing things like, say, making eye contact, or for that matter, simply make it impossible for you to project confidence, because nobody's going to invest money in a business person who doesn't have confidence. So we work on all of these things.
I was going to say, you just referred to your class. So this is the program that you've developed?
Yes, this is the program we developed, which is, I have come to realize, a bit unique in the Canadian experience. We do it one day a week on Saturdays in the afternoons for 3 hours for 12 weeks, which seems like very little time, but we do it that way because virtually all of our participants come from working 1, 2, even 3 jobs. They're not unemployed, they're underemployed. They don't make as much money as they should. They're working insane hours. They don't have the quality of life they would like, but they do not have a lot of time in their life to take a full-time program. So what we see are people generally who are very driven. Like one of the people I'm going to talk about here in a moment, one of our success stories, he worked 2 jobs and then drove cabs at night to finance his business and bootstrapped himself from nothing to success, and that's typical. So yes, it's, and we offer it in partnership with the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers, several of who staff are here on the line, attending the webinar. We couldn't do it without them. We tried other places while we were in development. They welcomed us. Rispa Tremblay, who is attending the webinar here, actually had the courage to believe in us and give us a home. And at first we had trouble with things like marketing and reaching people. We now have a rather significant waiting list. We can't really handle more than 30 people at a time, and I believe we're well over 50 people who expressed interest in our next one, which would be starting March 8th of 2014.
Well, before we get into the details of the program, tell us a bit about the history.
I started off, as I said, personal experience. I worked for what's called student help at the University of Alberta, and my specialty was working with professional class immigrants who were attending grad school principally at the U of A, most of them actually trying to figure out some way of reacquiring the skills, of becoming certified in Canada. And then I started working in what is now called a SEEP program, an SEP program, which is a federal government program that's administered by the province, where people come and take Momentum. I understand we have someone from Momentum in the group here. My understanding is they actually do a full-blown immigrant SEEP program specifically for immigrants. But when I was doing it, immigrants were blended in. You'd have a couple in each class, and that did not produce good outcomes. And I started thinking there needed to be a program specifically for them. And so then we started with what we now call the sort of various attempts at it, which eventually led to a beta test in 2010, and then we started doing the pilot program at Mennonite Centre, and I believe that would have been March of 2011. So in a month here, we will be at year 3. And I said April here, but I think it was actually in March of 2011. So we are now we just completed our 8th. The next one would be our 9th session. We have had some problems with people enrolling in the class and not finishing it. And one of the things that we have discovered is collecting good statistics about who is and isn't in business is trickier with immigrant entrepreneurs than with born here's, in that immigrant entrepreneurs may work to start their business for years. They'll tell you we're working on it. If a born here told you that, you'd go, we're never going to start. If an immigrant tells you that, the odds are exceedingly high that they're actually going to start. And so we constantly, every time we graduate a big class, none of them are in business, or maybe 1 or 2 were before they started, but nobody's really yet started a business, so our overall percentage drops, but we're also always adding a few from previous classes who finally got there. We just had somebody after 3 years, well, it'd be just coming up on 3 years because he was in the very first group, who finally got up and running. So, and the success rate that we're generating anyway far exceeds what you'd expect from the general population based on the research in entrepreneurship.
So that must be related, yes, to your teaching style, your pedagogy?
Well, it could be teaching style, which we use group process, because one of the things that immigrant entrepreneurs lack is mentors and network. And so we try to use group process so at least they leave with a network of other entrepreneurs that they've met in class. We get previous graduates to come back and talk, the successful ones who are out there who've solved some of these problems, so that they can serve as informal mentors. And we think a lot of it comes down to the fact that we hammer away at them being able to present their idea with confidence, and that you should never stop selling, that you should always be selling. You should always, you never know when the person you meet who says, what do you do for a living? And you tell them there's good evidence that you do that enough times, you'll find somebody who can help. And we make them work away at their business plan, even if they never have a written one, and these days most of them do because you have to. At least they have all their ideas organized. And one of the things that, part of our success may be the quality of people that we get. First of all, it's intimidating to be the facilitator standing up there. Many of these people have professional degrees, graduate degrees, that are highly educated. The average educational level in our classes is actually a completed undergraduate degree. I sat down and worked it out the other day. A completed undergraduate degree is the average, and some of them are people who didn't have access to regular school in the countries of origin. So you can imagine how educated some of them are. And they're incredibly hardworking and driven people. We've had people who literally come to class having just worked all night. And you do that, you probably have the right stuff. But are they frustrated with the Canadian system? Because most of them actually, they were successful back home. They can't figure out how to do it here because they see our system as weird and strange. And having never been in their countries, I don't know. Perhaps I'd see their systems as weird and strange. And what amazes us is how many of them are social entrepreneurs. They want to make the world a better place. They don't just want to make their own lives better. They want to make other people's lives better. And when you do it for born here's, you almost never get those social entrepreneurs. And so I just wanted to run through some of the success stories. These are all people.
You do these pretty quickly because I'm just
conscious of the time. Absolutely. Yeah. So I was telling you about the guy who drove cab. Worked 2 jobs, drove cab. Temeskin. He literally started his business by convincing someone to give him space for free and then buying all the display racks and stuff at auction for $1 because nobody else wanted them. Now there's real, true entrepreneurship. I know we have someone here who does, who's been doing research on agribusiness and entrepreneurs. Habiba, the second success story, she and her partner, they had a failing restaurant that succeeded only because it had some catering. They took their most popular catering item and have built a very successful food processing company and now employ, I don't know, it was 10, but they've just expanded into a whole nother line, so I think it's now like 19 people. And finally, another of those stories, by Annie and Lorena Alcantara, who are from the Philippines. They actually were, by the way, they were both medical professionals of a sort. They started a restaurant with no money down. They kept trying to buy a restaurant until somebody said to them, "I'm really frustrated. I want to retire. I'm going to Toronto for a month. Here are the keys." And they've never looked back. And so what we think we've learned is that you should be able to do these kinds of programs and not only find the people and help the people like Temeskin and Habiba and Bayani, but also you should have people come in who really are going to be major not-for-profits. And the work these people do around the world with no formal training, support, it boggles the mind that sitting in Edmonton, we've had people in our class who we have helped do social enterprise and charitable work now in 9 different countries around the world. You can't help but be sort of pumped by it. And I'm going to turn it over to Jacqueline, but I was just going to say, one of the things you get out of running these programs that no one ever tells you you're going to get is tremendous joy at being able to walk around the city you live in and visit all the people whose businesses you've had some role in helping to start or grow, and there is a pleasure and joy in that that is hard to describe.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's terrific. Thank you, Dennis. That's a very interesting presentation. I just remind everyone on the webinar that you can throw up your questions there into the chat box for Dennis at any time, any ideas or comments or questions you have, and we'll collect those for the question and answer period. But now I'm pleased to introduce Jacqueline Bazampora. Before immigrating to Canada, Jacqueline was very involved in empowering people living in extreme vulnerability. She worked to develop activities related to microcredit with 2 organizations, the Association for the Care of AIDS Orphans and the Society for Women Against AIDS in Africa. Now as coordinator of the Cercle d'Emprunt de l'Île de Montréal, Montreal Island Loan Circle program at the Montreal Community Loan Association, Jacqueline delivers business plan writing courses and coaches students through their business startup process. Building on the well-established Loan Circle model, in its first year, the Loan Circle program trained 41 participants in 6 loan circles with 5 businesses started. So thanks for joining us, Jacqueline.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for your good presentation.
Wow, it's great to have you here. So you're going to tell us a little bit about the MCLA's program.
Yeah.
Once
about the Cercle d'Emprunt de l'Île. It's a loan cycle, also called Pure Lending Program. I will talk about who we are, what we do, the goals program, the surprises, impact. I will give you some figures and the value added for our program. But before going throughout this program, I would like to introduce ASEM. It's Community Loan Fund, started since 23 years. And its mission is to fight poverty and exclusion through an innovative approach, community credit. We serve immigrants and non-immigrants. It means general people, but 80% of our clientele is immigrant. ASEM is a one-stop, if I can say it, for immigrants. We have 3 services. If you come and you want to start a business, but you don't have a business plan, you can do the loan cycle to prepare to structure your business plan. And that services, we called it entrepreneurship in our services. Then the entrepreneurship provides access to credit and technical support to individuals living on low income and to organizations that do not have access to traditional forms of credit for business projects. If you have a business plan, you can apply for the loan. You don't have to do training. We also provide loans for recognition of foreign credentials for professional immigrants only. If you have a profession and you want to make accreditation or training material, you can also apply for that. We do our program, the Pearl Learning program, the third program, and that Pearling program has been started in 2012, and to manage it well, it has been incorporated separately with SM, with its own capital fund, but we have the same board member and the same loan committee. And after December 2012, we did 6 sessions and graduated 31 participants, and we provide only 5 loans with our capital funds. But there is among the participants, some are already open their business by their own money.
That's fast, yeah. Can you tell us how the program works?
How the program works, we have some criteria. The program is not free. They pay registration fees, $30 only, because we needed to print the workshops. People must be with low income, and they have only one project idea. We offer a group training with a maximum of 10 participants. We give 8 workshops, one by one, every week on Wednesday or Tuesday from 9 to 3 p.m. In the morning until 12 and 30 is the theory. In the afternoon until 3 p.m. we do practical exercises or coaching. We can do group coaching or individual coaching. In our methodology, we encourage the exchange between participants in the intention of sharing experience and knowledge. You know, starting a business is a step-by-step process. We begin by a self-evaluation, which helps them to know their skills, weaknesses, strengths. They need to lead the project, and to know also what they have like assets to transfer in their businesses. We touch roles of business culture in Quebec. We touch the language of work, the French, and we do presentation of business, product, services offered, market analysis, marketing plan, human resources plan, and financial resources plan. And after the training, they have possibilities to get a loan for pre-startup or startup businesses.
And what's the range of the loan?
The amount of the loan is up $5,000.
Up to $5,000. Okay. Can you tell us about the goals of the program?
Pardon me?
Can you tell us about the goals of the program?
Yeah. We have some goals. We give training on key aspects of starting business in Quebec, and we build some capacities to them. We contribute to the confidence of the entrepreneur, empowerment also, and we help them they finish with a business plan, and we create sustainable jobs through our financing. And because we do monitoring too after opening, after set up the businesses, we ensure the business success, the entrepreneur business practice, the both.
So you've been running it for over a year now. What have been some of the lessons or the surprises perhaps from the process to date?
I have some surprises. In my groups, I have many immigrants than those born in Quebec. I can say immigrants are more entrepreneurs than those born in Quebec because they take many risks. When they want to open, they desire to create their own job, and maybe the administrative procedures are very simple and low in the cost. For example, if you want to open a business here in Montreal, the cost is very low. You want to open it under your own name, you pay nothing. If you want to give a name, you pay $32 per year. The cost is very low. Other surprise, the immigrants have many abilities and motivations. Those are very necessary to start the business plan. And when they come in my class, they need only information and financial support because they have capacities, they have motivations. I say that because the most of them have education level very high, and it helps very good. What I see when I begin to give the training, we was thinking about the group. We have the group very diversified. Some of them have a high education, others have a professional experience very big, others have a secondary school only with a low age, and I was thinking it will be difficult for me to have a good dynamic of group. But what I saw, even if it's different, the group is different, the group dynamic is very great. And everyone respects the opinion of the other, and they support each other, and I like it. We have some impacts of the program. Even if the objective of the training is to write a business plan, it's not an end in itself. Everyone begins the training with the hope of starting a business. But during the classes, during the market analysis, some of them realize that the project is not viable, or they don't have the right profile. Because we encourage the exchange, some of the group members give them feedback to help them to make decisions. Yes, your project is not viable. Yes, you don't have the right profile, but you can take your place differently in the community. And then they make their own decision, they define what to do next. And some of them choose to back to school, work for someone else, or launching business plan, business project. And for me, each avenue is considered as an individual success.
You have some numbers in terms of your results to date?
Yeah, among the 31 graduates, 10% abandoned the project, 34% continue to write business plan, 27% is in business, and the business. Among the 27%, we finance 12%, and 15% has their own capital fund, and 27% back to work, and 2% back to school. It's a success for me, if you begin the training and you want to start your business, but you have some various problems during the training, if you can define yourself a way to take your place in the community, it's very good.
Yes.
And
so,
what is the value added?
Yeah.
We provide loans for startup businesses. People gain network because the first group, your group became your first network in Quebec. Even if they don't open the business, the program will help them to integrate into society because it helps improve their situations, acquire skills such as organizational skills, planning tools, develop better the management of the company, or just validate your business idea.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Jacqueline.
Yeah, thank you too.
Great. Now, so that's those are two very interesting presentations. There you have your contact information, and we'll put that up at the end of the session again. But now it's time. We have about 20 minutes for the question and answer period. We have a lot of people from similar programs, immigrant serving agencies or entrepreneurship training programs across the country. So I'd be certainly welcome both your comments and thoughts and reactions related to what you do compared to what you heard from Dennis and Jacqueline. So people should feel free to go ahead and post the questions in the chat box now, questions or comments, and we can discuss those with the presenters. What I'm going to do is also I'm going to unsync the presentation, so you should be able now to scroll back through the slides yourselves, all the participants on the webinar, and revisit some of the slides that maybe went by too quickly on the first round. So I see a couple of people were typing, but don't see any questions up yet. So I'll just start off perhaps the discussion with a quick question. Jacqueline, you mentioned that the people that come to your sessions are interested mostly in information and capital, getting information because they're skilled and they're qualified. And Dennis, you said one of the biggest barriers was the, cultural, getting used to selling yourselves and practicing the pitch, and also developing the networks related to that are needed for business.
Yeah, because I say that they have capacities because they are educated,
Yes,
they have master, they have a bachelor, but they don't know how it operates in Quebec. But we give them information. If you need to about laws and the regulation, what to do.
Yeah, for example, in class, I'm with Jacqueline. In class, we do things like we actually, because in Alberta, it's somewhat different than in Quebec in that it's actually fairly expensive to register a company. We actually go step by step through the paperwork required to register the company and the laws and rules that apply. And we do things like we walk through the basics of tax law in Canada and of things like filling out a GST form because they lack these fundamental aspects that many of the more successful business people or successful professionals in countries that don't have the same sort of structured rules that we have here, or the same paperwork burden.
That's true.
Great. Okay, thank you. Now, Doreen has posted a question there for you, Jacqueline. Where do the funds come from for financing the immigrant entrepreneurship, the loans that you make?
They come from community. We have private investors who invest in our fund. And what they receive, they receive only 2% or nothing, because they like our mission and they want to do something for low-income people.
So it's the general loan fund or loan pool from the Montreal Community Loan Fund that you draw on for those loans? Yeah,
for the loan cycle, our first investor is ASEM.
Right.
But for the ASEM, they have private investors.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Very good. And then Anne posted, Anne Lockhart in Toronto, an interesting comment there. Whether or not entrepreneurial projects work better in large urban centers or in, I suppose, rural or remote locations by contrast, do entrepreneurial projects have better chances in a large urban setting? I guess Edmonton and Montreal are relatively
would
large
qualify
cities.
as fairly large urban. I'd like to actually take a shot at that. I became in part an entrepreneur because I had a high school teacher. I come from the small town of Dawson Creek, which is in northern BC. I had a high school teacher who created one of the first entrepreneurial training programs in Canada, a gentleman by the name of Mac Taylor, who subsequently won the Order of Canada for his work building entrepreneurs in the small town of Dawson Creek. There's over 80 businesses to this day in Dawson Creek that Mac's program launched, and he's been retired for 15, 18 years, something like that.
Wow.
So it can work if you get the right person, right place. I'd say it's probably easier in large urban centers because there's more resources, more network, but it can work in small towns.
Perhaps a bigger market also in the larger urban settings?
Oh yeah, bigger market, more opportunities, plus Dawson Creek, where I come from, is about as isolated in terms of being able to get materials in and out as any place you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Jacqueline, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can say in the urban center, it's better than rural center because here, for example, in Montreal, we have many organizations who support technically and financially. Then if you want to open, it will be easy for you if you are in the urban center. Even if we have many organizations, many institutions in the rural. But here we have networking, many opportunity to meet other entrepreneurs and exchange on everything.
Good, thank you. I see there's more than one Ann on the call here, so I shouldn't have presumed it was Ann Lockhart. Sorry about that, and thanks both Anns for your comments and questions. Donna posted a question for Jacqueline. You mentioned that participants can access a loan without taking the training as long as they have a business plan. What is your process for reviewing or evaluating business plans?
People who have loans without taking courses here, they must come with their own business plan. Mm-hmm. And then they can apply directly at ASEM and ask for a loan.
And there's a loan review committee that reviews the business plans?
Yeah, they must meet the loan committee, but we have some cases, especially immigrants, who doesn't do big education. Writing is difficult for them. We do what we call a business plan template. It's a kind of questions they can answer, and after that, the advisor make with the entrepreneur the financial forecast to ask for a loan. But it's not for everybody. It's case by case. If you see you have a problem of writing business, but you have your good idea, you can tell about your clients, you verbalize your project, and then you can work together the financial forecast. And you can apply for the money. But the amount is up $5,000 only.
The maximum limit is $5,000.
Five.
Yes. ASEM, you don't have other programs with larger limits?
Pardon me?
ASEM doesn't have other programs that have a larger loan maximum loan amount?
We have a program we call the Gold Objectives. Mm-hmm. We finance immigrants, professional immigrants, mm-hmm. who wants to recognize the diploma,
right, the credentials,
of foreign of the country. Mettons you come here and you are an engineer, but you want to pass an exam to go in the Ordre des Ingénieurs.
Yep.
You don't have money, you come here and we give you a loan. The amount is up $10,000.
For a credential recognition training.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Then Jackie has posted a question here as well for both Dennis and Jacqueline. With respect to the language level, what language level are your materials developed for? Language obviously is one of the barriers for immigrants often. And how do you assess the language level appropriateness to participate in the program? Who wants to take a shot at that?
I'll start. I don't know how much this would mean to anyone because I'm not sure how universal it is across Canada, but what we're looking for is what we call Link 4. Here ESL training is broken into at least 6, and I think there's actually maybe more, but most people would consider that they were fairly fluent at Link 6. We will take them at Link 4, which is basically they can follow what we're saying, which is the most important thing. And so for the other part, how we assess that, up until we're about to try a new intake process, but up until now what we have been doing is 2 of my business partners have been, 2 of the volunteers who work with us have been interviewing every single person and engaging them in a conversation. And if they can follow the conversation, then we assume they can follow the class. And one of the things we get out of the class is that we've had all sorts of people tell us that it has, and we can hear it and see it, improved their English skills immensely.
So it's an informal process. How about you, Jacqueline?
For us, the language level must be good or excellent, because we'd like to write the business, and to write needs an excellent French. But if you can verbalize, if you can speak French and verbalize your project, we can also help you. But there is you have to say, I'm not able. But you are able to write, even if you make many faults, I can correct you. But we need ideas. We need your project ideas. You need everything, but you can help you. But people who comes here are excellent in French. Or even if they finish Francisation here, we can see if the people is able to write. Not if he's not able to write. If he can verbalize the project, we can give him after the business plan template, and he can also begin the business with a low loan, $5,000.
So you don't have any formal process for assessing the language capacity and determining who you can help or who you can't, or how?
No, we don't do that. No.
Okay. Great. I hopefully that answers Jackie's question. Just one follow-up there. Then, Dennis, below Link 4, what do you do? Do you refer them for English second language training, or do you have anything?
Yes, we've actually had a couple people have lower English than that who took the program and thrived, but as a general rule, we found it was a bad practice because we're simply having to spend too much time one-on-one explaining things.
Right.
But yes, we do suggest other programs, if they aren't already registered, or suggest they try the program again when their English has improved. We've had several people realize their English just wasn't good enough, who then went off and worked on it and came back. But we also try very hard to keep the language of instruction and of the written materials, like one of the things the Mennonite Centre kindly did as part of the partnership is provided someone who we give them a textbook, and a great young man spent a great deal of time reducing it down. He's doing his graduate degree in linguistics, and he reduced it down to simpler language, more straightforward, more, keep the examples simple and straightforward, and so on. But so we try to teach at a fairly basic English level, and we actually have had people where what really got them through is that other people who did speak their language more or less did simultaneous translation in class.
Wow. Intensive, and that you mentioned about the networks and the relationships, and so that kind of social capital does make a big difference in helping people get through.
Yeah, one of the things I got out of listening to Jacqueline talk is that her experience is very similar to mine in that they're very highly educated, have very high capacity, are confused or perhaps just a little intimidated by the Canadian system. Mm-hmm. They need information, business culture, business language, but they're very skilled, driven people. But also that one of the great beauties is watching groups of people from around the world gel as a group. And it's amazing. 3 years, people who started with us basically 3 years ago, they still remain friends. They're still helping each other. They truly became a network, and that network has expanded, and we have crossovers where people from various groups have actually become very good friends, and in a couple of cases are working towards business ventures together.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's a marvelous process. We just have a couple minutes left. I think I see at least one person typing, but we've covered the questions. I had a short question perhaps related to an aspect of business development or training I don't think either of you mentioned. A lot of business development programs that I've heard of have a mentorship angle. And I just wondered, is that anything that you've considered, or I guess beyond, because there's some peer mentoring, sounds like, in the group processes you use, but have you considered trying to connect with established entrepreneurs or businesses to do more cross-cultural or mentoring with the Canadian-born entrepreneurs?
Well, there was a program here run by Business Link, which is a joint operation of, I guess, the city and the province and maybe the federal government as well, where a woman by the name of Marie Gervais ran a mentorship program that did specifically that, and more than several actually. Some of our graduates went on to that. We haven't tried it ourselves because they tend to break down, though it's happened spontaneously where we've simply known someone who is a near perfect fit, but it's actually very hard to do structured simply because of the difficulties of the matching process, I think would be what I would say.
Good, okay. Just have one last question here then from Carol at REAP Ontario. Have any of the participants in your programs, Jacqueline or Dennis, experienced immigrant owners of small or mid-sized businesses creating financing structures amongst themselves, especially businesses that support each other in a value chain? So I guess you mentioned, Dennis, some emerging partnerships or business ventures. And sometimes, Jacqueline, when we think of a loan circle, we think of people putting in their own capital that's traded or shared, loaned by in turn. Is there any group financing that has emerged from the immigrant entrepreneurship support programs that you've managed to date?
Oh, after loan cycle, we do many network among all the participants, and we do it per 2 months. They come here, they exchange everything, and we invite the new entrepreneurs who are doing training, and they exchange. I begin by own money. I lend my money from, and there is not matters, but they give experiences in the businesses. What are the barriers after training? What are the success? What can be changed? Everything. But we are in partnership with Les Bénévoles d'Affaires, and sometimes we ask if we want to do marketing, for example, analysis, and we want to do we want to go outside and meet some competitors and looking after clients. They come to help us to do everything outside, but there are volunteers. I can't call them mentors, but we try to do networking with all the groups.
And I suppose the successful businesses can also become investors in the Montreal Community Loan Fund as well.
We have
help pay it back.
2 enterprises, and we have one enterprise who is in our board member, and they decide on the governance of ASEAN.
Excellent. Dennis,
and we're working towards one. We have been working for several years now towards one that would be more like a conventional lending circle, an actual immigrant-funded immigrant bank that came actually out of our participants working together as a team, had nothing to do with us. They just invited us to help with the board development process. And it's sort of, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So maybe a year or 2 from now we can talk about that one.
And RISPA has posted a comment there. If people want to know more information about mentorship, they look up Business Link and the Immigrant Entrepreneur Mentorship Program. So those will be
that was a great program while they had funding. It was a tremendous thing. Unfortunate that the funding was not ongoing.
As too often happens. Well, we're out of time. We've covered a lot of material. Thank you very much to everyone for your participation. Here are a few links. If participants on the webinar want to find out more about the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers, a very innovative and interesting organization that CCEDNet's been following and profiling for many years, the Wildman Institute, Dennis's organization, the Montreal Community Loan Fund, and some other resources that are posted on the CCEDNet's website, the page for this webinar. So you should also have just received an email. Everyone on the webinar should have received an email with a link to a 1-minute evaluation survey. Please take a second if you don't mind, and you can fill it out right now. It really should be very short, just 1 minute, and your feedback is very important to us. And so finally, many thanks again to Dennis and Jacqueline for sharing their unique perspective and experiences. And thanks to everyone on the call, on the webinar, for your questions and participation. The webinar recording is going to be posted on our website in the coming days, and we'll send the link to everyone as soon as it's available.